Karen blocked my pregnant sister's car. She didn't know I run state security. They say power reveals a person, but in my experience, so does a blocked driveway. That afternoon, I wasn't on a mission. I wasn't hunting down foreign threats or handling national crises. I was just picking up my sister from her prenatal appointment, the third one I'd driven her to since her husband deployed overseas. Maya's 8 months pregnant. She's strong, but not invincible. And lately, her blood pressure's been a concern. We'd moved her temporarily into a gated neighborhood called Hearthstone Bend, the kind of place with white fences, hydrangeas in bloom, and a neighborhood watch group with more power than sense. The move was supposed to be for safety. It became anything but. I got the call from her while I was turning into the main boulevard. "Langston," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm locked in. A woman parked behind me. She said I don't match the profile of this community." I felt my grip on the wheel tighten. "She blocked your car." "She stood in front of it first. Now her SUV is across my driveway. She won't move." "Is she threatening you?" "She's screaming. There's a crowd now. I think she called someone, I don't know who." "Langston, I can't breathe." My foot hit the gas. I didn't wait for protocol. I didn't call backup. I just drove. Because in that moment, I wasn't a security chief. I was a brother. I arrived in less than 4 minutes. Her car, a silver Hyundai, sat behind a gleaming white BMW X5 parked diagonally across the driveway, like a territorial dog. Maya's face was visible through the windshield red, sweaty, hand on her swollen belly, panic blooming in her eyes. In front of the BMW stood a woman with a clipboard, sunglasses, and the practiced sneer of someone used to being obeyed. She was yelling. HOA Code 3B5. No improper loitering in parked vehicles. No unauthorized visitors during restricted hours. You people are always testing boundaries. That was the first line I heard. It would also be the last she ever spoke without consequences. I stepped out of my car in full suit, badge in hand. I didn't raise my voice. "Step away from the vehicle." Karen turned. Her mouth opened, froze mid-insult. Who? Who are you supposed to be, security?" I held up my credentials. She blinked when she saw the seal, Virginia Department of Homeland and State Security Executive Director. "My name is Langston Ward, and you are obstructing the mobility of a pregnant woman, endangering her health, and impersonating a legal authority with a vehicle used for coercive control." She scoffed. "This is a gated HOA community. I'm the chair of safety aesthetics." "No, you're not," I interrupted. "This community's HOA was formally dissolved in 2021. You have no enforcement power and no right to block driveways. But she doesn't even own the property. She's my sister, and she lives here legally, temporarily, as a citizen, as a mother, as a human being." That's when someone in the crowd started filming, and the storm truly began. The first camera phone went up the moment I said, "Step away from the vehicle." The second came up when Karen, or Tammy Veldman, as I later learned, jabbed her clipboard in the air and shouted, "This man is impersonating law enforcement. He's threatening a private citizen." The crowd of neighbors murmured, shifting uneasily. Some looked at each other, unsure which reality they were living in. Others had seen enough. They kept recording. That's when I called it in. "Dispatch. This is Director Ward, badge 4120DS. I'm on site at Hearthstone Bend. I have a woman obstructing private egress and impersonating an HOA officer. I need City Patrol to log and document her vehicle. Plate Delta, Kilo 93 Romeo." Karen turned pale. "You can't. That's my personal property." "You're using it as a barricade," I said flatly, "against a pregnant woman." Maya's door creaked open. Her voice was weak. "Langston." I was beside her in seconds, crouching, one arm around her shoulders, guiding her from the heat. She had started to cramp. Her breathing was shallow, her hands trembling. I looked her in the eyes. "I've got you now." Paramedics arrived within minutes, called by a neighbor. Not Karen. They escorted Maya into the ambulance while checking vitals and applying cool compresses. Karen tried to follow. She's pretending you people play the victim so easily, I was just doing my job. That's when I turned fully and faced her. Tammy Veldman, I said, step back from the responders, or you'll face charges for obstructing emergency medical care. She stood frozen, like she'd just seen her name on a warrant, and I hadn't even started digging yet. The next day, I started pulling threads. As Director of State Security, I have full access to interagency databases, zoning, municipal records, HOA registrations, tax-exempt organizations, code enforcement complaints. I started with Hearthstone Bend's HOA registry. There wasn't one. The HOA had been legally dissolved in 2021 after a failed budget vote and internal financial misconduct. What replaced it was a Heritage Cohesion Council, unofficial, unsanctioned, and completely unregulated. At the top of every document, I named Tammy Veldman, Chair of Aesthetic Integrity and Behavioral Oversight. What followed were policy memos that read like a dictator's diary. Residents may not idle vehicles in driveways longer than 4 minutes. Visitors in casual clothing must be reported for potential code relaxation. Pregnant individuals not listed as deed holders must provide proof of family residency. I was stunned. It wasn't just petty, it was strategic discrimination. A system to police who looked like they belonged and who didn't. I requested public surveillance footage from the street-facing smart lamps, part of the city's new safety program. The AI index flagged Tammy in 113 separate incidents of proximal confrontation. She had blocked food delivery drivers, taken photos of dark-skinned teenagers biking after 5 p.m., left typed warnings on a Jewish family's menorah decorations, reported a Nigerian nurse to her building manager because she wore scrubs not issued from our local hospital. One recording showed her standing in the middle of the road, yelling at a black father dropping his kid off, "Slow down. This is a legacy neighborhood, not a track meet." Another showed her pointing a phone camera at an autistic boy spinning in the cul-de-sac, saying, "I'll send this to child services if you don't stop his behavior." My hands clenched at the keyboard. She hadn't just blocked Maya's car. She'd been running a psychological HOA regime, with no license, no charter, no accountability. I compiled the evidence, and then I met with City Legal. What I presented wasn't just a case of impersonation. It was a pattern of community-based harassment, coercive property intimidation, and unlawful restraint of movement. And yet, I knew this wasn't just about one woman, because where there's a Karen with a clipboard, there's usually a man funding her. I've tracked narco-funding rings through Venezuelan shell accounts. I've followed extremist cells as they bounce crypto through 3 continents. But nothing chilled me quite like what I uncovered from Tammy Veldman's HOA Dropbox. Because unlike all the others, this one had a smiling face on the front porch. After City Legal gave me preliminary clearance, I initiated a formal probe into the Hearthstone Heritage Cohesion Council, Tammy's fake authority structure. We weren't just looking for forged fines or harassment reports anymore. We were chasing money. It didn't take long to find the motherlode. Inside a folder labeled Legacy Support Docs Confidential, Tammy had uploaded PDFs, donor receipts, meeting minutes, and a private ledger of honorary backers. One name kept popping up. Richard Drexler, title architect of neighborhood identity occupation developer, private equity housing, retired city councilman. The same Richard Drexler who owned 5 real estate LLCs. The same man who donated $20,000 to 3 separate community preservation ballot measures in the past 2 years. The same Drexler who had been quietly buying foreclosed homes in black majority zip codes, flipping them with fake HOA paperwork, and reselling them for 45% over market. Tammy wasn't just an annoying neighbor with a god complex. She was enforcing an invisible border for Richard's empire. Here's how it worked. Richard Drexler would buy up homes in transitioning neighborhoods under shell companies. He would back resident coalitions that sounded innocent Heritage Guild, Visual Harmony Council, Safety Pride Board. Tammy and her kind would act as foot soldiers. They'd harass, intimidate, deter. The goal: push out longtime residents who didn't fit the aesthetic, people of color, renters, immigrants, multi-generational families. As property turnover accelerated, Drexler would cash in by curating the new buyer pool, usually young, white, high income, politically neutral. It was social cleansing disguised as neighborhood order. And my pregnant sister had been one more boundary they wanted to redraw. But Drexler's arrogance made him sloppy. His assistant, likely underpaid, had uploaded raw email logs to a public-facing backup server. One of them read, "Tammy's doing beautifully. Once the last of the legacy types are gone, we'll move in phase 2, fence approvals, tech hubs, and drone zoning. HOA may be dead, but fear is a currency. Use it." I printed that out and stared at it for a long time. Fear is a currency. It echoed in my head. That's what this was about. Not rules, not fences, not lawns or noise. Control, fear, order. Exercised by people who thought community was code for people who look and act like me. I brought the findings to the Attorney General's office and the Housing Equity Task Force. Within 48 hours, an investigative order was issued. Within a week, state auditors froze Drexler's assets. And within 10 days, his house was surrounded by media vans. But I wasn't done, because justice in court doesn't undo pain on sidewalks. I wanted Tammy to answer not just to a judge, but to the people she made afraid to live. We organized a public hearing. The city auditorium, usually half full for zoning meetings, was packed shoulder to shoulder. Maya sat front row. Naomi kicked softly inside her belly. One by one, residents came forward. The father Tammy filmed picking up his kid. The disabled vet she fined for having an access ramp. A biracial teenager she accused of being suspicious for walking with headphones. They told their stories. The room buzzed with quiet, righteous fury. Then Tammy was called to respond. She walked in with pearls on her neck and a file folder under her arm, like this was just another day to assert control. She said, "I acted in good faith. My goal has always been to maintain the standards and spirit of this community. I was given moral authority by my neighbors. I stood. Your neighbors never voted for you. You wrote their names on forged petitions. You blocked a pregnant woman in a heat wave because of your own prejudice. And you helped enable a housing scheme designed to uproot families who didn't meet your standard." She scoffed. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I said nothing. I simply turned, opened the projector screen, and played a 19-second clip. Tammy's voice. Shaky video. I don't care how far along she is. She can park outside the gates with the rest of them. Silence, then gasps, then applause. Long. Louder than any HOA meeting ever held in that town. Tammy Veldman didn't say another word after that clip played. Not a denial, not a single apology. Just a tight-lipped shake of her head, like she still couldn't believe her little empire had finally crashed into the real world. But it had, and the crowd in that hearing hall. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were witnesses. They were survivors. And some of them, after what we uncovered, were now plaintiffs. The charges came swiftly. The Attorney General's office filed a multi-count criminal complaint against Tammy and Richard Drexler. It included criminal impersonation of an officer or regulator, falsification of public documents, harassment under color of authority, racketeering and conspiracy to suppress housing equity. More charges were pending under the Fair Housing Act at the federal level. Tammy had been served at her home the next morning. She didn't answer the door, but the moment her mugshot hit the news cycle, her pearls off. Her visor gone, the dominoes started to fall nationwide. Because Hearthstone Bend wasn't the only neighborhood where this was happening. All across Virginia, stories poured in. A mother in Chesapeake fined $300 for non-conforming stroller color. A disabled teen in Roanoke cited for erratic walking behavior. An interracial couple in Fairfax told their front porch clashed with community tones. Every fake HOA, every community council, all traced back to Drexlian Investment Group. He hadn't been buying houses. He'd been buying silence, one manipulated neighborhood at a time. As the indictments rolled in, Maya became more than a name on a police report. She became the face of the movement. At first, she didn't want it. "I just wanted to get to my doctor's appointment," she whispered to me the day she got the invitation from a major national broadcast. "But you didn't," I reminded her gently, "because someone thought they had the right to decide whether you belonged." She looked down at her belly. Naomi kicked. I don't want her to grow up thinking fear is a policy tool. 2 weeks later, Maya sat across from a national news anchor in a crisp blue maternity dress, voice steady. I was 8 months pregnant. I was in my own driveway. I was blocked in because of the color of my skin, the style of my car, and the assumptions in one woman's head. I didn't call the police. I called my brother. What she didn't know is that my brother happens to run state security. But what if I hadn't had that connection? How many people are suffering in silence, isolated, gaslit, bullied by fake authority dressed up in pastel words like aesthetics or community standard? That's why I'm here, because everyone deserves the right to simply exist visibly, peacefully, and safely in their own neighborhood. By the time the segment ended, the anchor was speechless. Maya didn't just share her story, she ignited a wildfire. The state legislature responded within the month. The Community Equity and Housing Rights Act was introduced with bipartisan support. Key provisions: criminalization of unauthorized enforcement by unregulated neighborhood entities, automatic dissolution of advisory boards that issue citations without legal authority, mandatory signage on all neighborhoods denoting active or inactive HOA status, a state-backed hotline for victims of housing intimidation and HOA impersonation. It passed in 63 days. They called it Maya's Law. Meanwhile, Richard Drexler fled to West Virginia. He was picked up in a cabin outside Elkins. No phone, no computer, no pearls like Tammy's, just a notebook full of addresses and printed donation logs. His bail was denied. He's facing a federal racketeering trial. Tammy pled not guilty at her arraignment, but the judge had already seen the footage. Her trial date was set for January, and this time the entire country would be watching. It took the jury 3 hours to reach a decision. Tammy Veldman was found guilty on all primary counts: impersonating an enforcement official, obstruction of emergency medical access, filing false documentation, coordinated harassment under color of authority. But it was the judge's sentencing that left the courtroom silent. You used paper, position, and performance to create fear. You wielded a clipboard like a badge, a driveway like a weapon, and silence like policy. You said your goal was to protect the neighborhood's image. Well, now you're the image the country sees, and it's finally ashamed of what it allowed. Tammy sat frozen. For once, not even her lips moved. She was sentenced to 18 months in county detention, with 3 years probation and a permanent ban on serving in any regulatory, advisory, or community authority role in the state of Virginia. And the restitution, $97,000 in damages paid directly to families she had targeted. The largest portion went to my sister, but Tammy's verdict was only half the story, because just 2 weeks later, Maya went into labor. It was calm this time. Safe. She was surrounded by people who loved her. Her husband was finally back from deployment. I stood outside the delivery room with trembling hands and a silent prayer. And when Naomi Grace Hale finally entered the world, the first thing she saw wasn't fear, it was peace. The following month, our city held a ceremony. They unveiled a new welcome sign at the entrance of Hearthstone Bend. The old HOA placard had been removed. In its place was a sleek bronze sign etched with these words: "This community belongs to everyone who lives here, not to fear, not to control, and never again to silence." Beneath that was a bench, the same one Tammy once called non-compliant. Now it bore Maya's name. People came from across the state: mothers, veterans, students, renters, neighbors of every background who had once been afraid to speak up. Maya didn't give a speech. She didn't need to. She just sat on that bench, baby in arms, and smiled. And around her, a crowd gathered, standing, nodding, some with tears in their eyes. Because sometimes the loudest justice is stillness reclaimed. Maya's Law spread. By spring, 6 states had adopted similar legislation. HOA impersonation became a felony in 3 of them. A national database for unlawful neighborhood authority complaints was launched, anonymous, free, and open source. Civil rights groups used Maya's footage in training. Real estate schools revised their ethics modules. And federal legislators began drafting the Neighborhood Equity and Accountability Act, a bill inspired by a woman who just wanted to go to a prenatal checkup in peace. I was interviewed by a news anchor not long after. He asked me, Director Ward, what's the moral of your story? I paused. Then said, when you have real authority, you learn to listen. When you abuse fake authority, you only learn how to shout. Tammy shouted. Maya sat, and the world heard her louder than any citation ever written. Have you ever witnessed someone misusing fake authority to control others? Have you ever felt targeted just for existing, walking, parking, sitting while someone tried to shrink your space? Tell us below, should community power come from inclusion or enforcement? Should safety be defined by who feels uncomfortable or by who's made to disappear? Your voice matters. Let's talk about what it really means to belong.